When an avoidant man starts developing real feelings for you, he usually will not admit it directly. Instead, he watches how you respond. He pulls back, creates distance, and quietly tests whether being close to you feels emotionally safe. By the end of this video, you will understand the most common tests an avoidant man may unconsciously use when he genuinely wants you in his life. Once you recognize them, his confusing behavior will start making much more sense. If you have ever watched a man become distant right after your connection felt stronger, comment "felt" below. And if you have ever handled one of these situations without realizing you were passing a test, comment "tested." Now let's look at what happens when an avoidant man's feelings become serious. People often say avoidant men are afraid of love, but many are not afraid of love itself. They are afraid of what love exposes. They may fear being completely known, becoming dependent, or needing someone who could eventually hurt or reject them. So when feelings become strong, closeness can trigger an internal alarm. Instead of saying, "I'm scared because I care about you," he may create distance and watch your reaction. These behaviors are often protective habits rather than conscious manipulation. Underneath them are questions like, can I get close without losing myself? Can I trust her without regretting it? Can I let her see me without getting hurt? Before fully opening up, he may look for proof that you are emotionally safe. The first test is the distance test. Everything may be going beautifully. He texts regularly, seems affectionate, makes plans, and the connection feels stronger. Then suddenly he changes. His replies become shorter. He takes longer to respond. Plans become vague. He initiates less. You immediately wonder, did I do something wrong? But sometimes his feelings have not disappeared. The growing closeness has simply activated his defenses. He may be watching whether you can handle his need for space without chasing him. If you repeatedly text, demand explanations, or seek reassurance, he may experience that as pressure and think, if I get close, I'll lose my freedom. But if you stay grounded, continue living your life, and allow him space, you communicate something different. You can have space with me without losing me. That can make closeness feel safer. The second test is the silence test. An avoidant man may become quiet after an emotionally intense moment. Maybe you had a deep conversation, shared something personal, or experienced an unusually intimate date. Then his replies slow down. You may wonder whether the connection meant anything to him, but sometimes silence is his way of regulating himself after more closeness than he knows how to process. The question underneath it may be, can she handle uncertainty without turning it into chaos? Will you send message after message, demand reassurance, or accuse him of changing? Or can you give him room to process? Instead of obsessing over his phone activity, return to your own life. Spend time with friends, work on your goals, exercise, read, or simply enjoy your day. That independence is not manipulation. It shows that your emotional stability does not depend entirely on his attention, and that can make it easier for him to move toward you again. The third test is the jealousy or replacement test. An avoidant man may mention an ex, tell you someone was flirting with him, or become more social after a close moment with you. This does not always mean he is trying to make you jealous. Sometimes he is checking whether he still has an escape route. He may be asking, if this becomes serious, can I still leave? So he watches your reaction. Do you become possessive? Compete with another woman? Try to prove your value? Demand reassurance? Or can you remain secure in yourself? You do not need to act cold or pretend you do not care. You simply do not need to abandon your self-worth because another woman exists. When your response comes from confidence instead of fear, he sees that closeness with you does not have to mean constant competition or pressure. The fourth test is the vulnerability test. This often looks small. He might mention a painful childhood memory, admit that he is struggling, or reveal something personal during an ordinary conversation. It may only last a few seconds, but for him it can be significant. He is watching what happens after he opens that door. Do you immediately ask endless questions, push him to explain more, become overly emotional, or can you simply receive what he shared? Avoidant people may have learned that vulnerability leads to criticism, dismissal, or being hurt later. So when he reveals something personal, your response teaches him whether openness is safe with you. If you respond calmly, you show him that he does not have to reveal everything at once. Trust is built through repeated small moments where he opens up and discovers that nothing terrible happens afterward. The fifth test is the conflict test. An avoidant man may pay close attention to how you behave when you disagree. He may care less about the argument itself than how you handle it. Do you raise your voice, threaten to leave, bring up every past mistake, attack him personally? Or can you remain calm while clearly expressing what you need? For someone who associates conflict with chaos, anger, rejection, or withdrawal, healthy disagreement can be powerful. You can be upset without becoming destructive. You can set a boundary without threatening the relationship. You can disagree without humiliating him. When he realizes that conflict with you does not automatically destroy the connection, something important changes. Watch what happens afterward. He may reach out sooner, reopen the conversation, explain something he could not say before, or become slightly warmer. He is learning that disagreement does not have to mean losing you. The sixth test is the future test. This one is usually subtle. He may mention a trip months from now and include you. He may ask about your plans for the future. He might say, "We could do that someday," and then quickly change the subject when he notices your excitement. You may wonder, did I imagine that? Probably not. Sometimes an avoidant man introduces the idea of a future indirectly before he is ready to openly commit to it. He is testing how it feels. But if you immediately turn his comment into a serious relationship discussion or treat it like a promise, he may retreat because possibility has suddenly become pressure. Instead, receive it warmly without grabbing onto it. Let the idea breathe. Because sometimes the man who is afraid to say, "I see you in my future," will reveal it first through one small sentence he almost wishes he had never said. And remember, these tests are not excuses for poor treatment. There is a difference between someone struggling with avoidant attachment while still showing care, effort, and gradual progress, and someone who is simply inconsistent or uninterested. Do not chase someone endlessly just because you can explain his behavior. The goal is not to become perfect at passing an avoidant man's tests. The goal is to remain secure, maintain your standards, and discover whether he is actually capable of meeting you halfway. If you react with too much excitement, start making plans, or treat his comment like a promise, he may retreat because the possibility suddenly feels like pressure. But if you receive it warmly without holding onto it too tightly, you give that future idea space to grow naturally. The seventh test is the comparison test. An avoidant man may suddenly mention an ex or talk about what went wrong in a past relationship. It can feel hurtful, but often he is not really focused on the ex. He is thinking out loud about what he wants and does not want, using you as a safe place to process it. What he is watching is your reaction. Can you listen without becoming defensive or competitive? Can you hear about his past without turning it into a judgment of yourself? If you can hold that space without spiraling, he may begin learning that honesty is safe with you. And for an avoidant man, discovering that his honesty will not be punished can become a powerful foundation for trust. The eighth test is the affection withdrawal test. This often happens immediately after a powerful moment of closeness. Maybe you spent an incredible weekend together. Maybe he shared something deeply personal. Maybe your emotional or physical intimacy reached a new level. Then suddenly, he becomes less affectionate for a few days. You may think, did I scare him away? Did I do something wrong? But sometimes this is an emotional after effect of intimacy. The closeness felt so intense that his nervous system became overwhelmed. For someone used to emotional distance, sustained intimacy can feel unfamiliar, even when he genuinely wants it. So his instinct may be to slow everything down. This is painful because the withdrawal comes right after you felt closest to him. But instead of immediately demanding an explanation, give him some breathing room while remaining warm and normal. What he may be learning is whether closeness always has to lead to pressure or abandonment, or whether two people can become close and then simply return to ordinary, safe connection. The ninth test is the boundary test. An avoidant man may sometimes push against a boundary to see how you respond. Maybe he cancels plans at the last minute, arrives late without much explanation, or becomes slightly more distant. Underneath it may be a question: if I disappoint her, will she punish me, control me, or reject me? If you explode, guilt-trip him, or threaten to end everything over one mistake, you may reinforce his fear that closeness eventually becomes control. But if you calmly say, "I did not appreciate that, and next time I would like more notice," you teach him something different. You show him that boundaries and warmth can exist together. You can hold your standards without turning the relationship into an emotional battle. For someone who learned that love comes with conditions, that kind of stability can be deeply reassuring. The 10th test is disappearing after vulnerability. This often happens after he shares something deeply personal. Maybe he tells you about his family, his past, or a fear he rarely discusses. Then, almost immediately afterward, he disappears for a day or two. No explanation, no follow-up, just silence. This does not always mean he regrets opening up. He may simply be dealing with the feeling of having exposed too much of himself. Now he is watching what happens next. Will you pressure him to reveal more? Will you bring what he shared into future arguments? Will you suddenly expect him to become emotionally open all the time? When he returns, you do not have to interrogate the silence. Simply continue naturally. You do not need to pretend the vulnerable moment never happened, but you also do not need to punish him for opening up. That sends an important message. What you shared with me is safe. Over time, experiences like this can help reduce the need to disappear whenever vulnerability becomes uncomfortable. But now, understand something extremely important. None of these patterns are permission to accept mistreatment. There is a major difference between an avoidant man who struggles with closeness while still showing respect, effort, and gradual growth, and a man who is simply inconsistent, careless, or unwilling to invest. Avoidant attachment can explain certain behaviors, but it should never become an excuse for neglect, disrespect, manipulation, or one-sided effort. If he sometimes pulls away but continues showing care, making an effort, opening up, and gradually moving closer, there may be genuine attachment fears underneath his behavior. But if there is no warmth, no effort, no consistency, and no movement toward you, do not keep calling it an avoidant test. Sometimes a man is simply not invested. Knowing that difference protects your heart. So how do you move through these patterns without losing yourself? The answer is not pretending to be calm while secretly falling apart. The goal is to become secure enough that his temporary distance does not control your emotional state. When he pulls away, do not immediately reach for your phone. Take a walk, call a friend, work on something meaningful, spend time with people who consistently show up for you, and resist the urge to over-explain your feelings while he is withdrawing. You do not need to convince an avoidant man that you are worth choosing. Repeatedly explaining, justifying, and proving your value usually comes from anxiety, and that anxiety can create even more pressure. Imagine he goes quiet for 2 days after a great date. One response might be, "Hey, I noticed you've been distant. Did I do something wrong? Please tell me what's happening because this is stressing me out." Another could simply be, "Hey, hope your week is going well, just thinking of you." Both responses show care, but they create very different emotional environments. The first asks him to manage your anxiety while he is already managing his own emotions. The second gives him room to reconnect without feeling responsible for immediately fixing your emotional state. But this does not mean ignoring your needs. There is a difference between anxiety and self-respect. Anxiety says, "I need to keep texting until he responds so I can feel okay." Self-respect says, "I deserve consistency. If this pattern continues, I will have an honest conversation about it." One comes from fear in the moment. The other comes from protecting yourself over time. Let your consistency speak for you. Keep your own life full. Respond warmly when he reconnects without punishing him for needing space, but do not pretend that his behavior never affected you. There is a healthy space between clinginess and coldness. It is steadiness. And that steady presence can show an avoidant man that intimacy does not have to mean losing himself. But remember one final thing. These tests are usually not conscious strategies designed to manipulate you. Most of the time, he is not sitting there planning his next move like a chess player. His reactions may come from old fears and emotional patterns that taught him to protect himself through distance. So when he pulls away or closes the door after letting you in, the most important question is not, "How do I make him chase me?" Ask instead, "What is his behavior showing me, and what do I need to remain healthy and secure?" Because the goal is not to become perfect at passing an avoidant man's tests. The goal is to stay grounded enough that you do not lose yourself while discovering whether he is truly capable of meeting you halfway. It is a nervous system reacting to old emotional wiring, trying to protect itself from being hurt the way it was before. Maybe that happened in childhood, where closeness became associated with control, rejection, or abandonment. Maybe it happened in a past relationship where vulnerability was used against him. Understanding this does not mean you owe him unlimited patience. It does not mean you should remain in a relationship that constantly drains you while waiting for him to heal. It simply means you stop taking his distance as proof that something is wrong with you. His withdrawal is not a verdict on your worth. It reflects fears and patterns that existed before you entered his life. Sometimes those fears begin in childhood. Maybe his emotional needs were met with irritation instead of comfort. Maybe he learned that asking for too much attention would result in rejection or shame. Maybe a parent was loving one moment and emotionally unavailable the next, teaching him that closeness could never truly be trusted. Other times, the wound comes from an adult relationship where opening up led to criticism, control, betrayal, or abandonment. None of this excuses poor behavior today. But it can explain why an avoidant man's reactions are often not really about you. You could be the most patient, secure, and loving person he has ever known, and he may still repeat some of these patterns because the fear did not begin with you. What changes the pattern is not your perfection, it is consistency. When he experiences enough moments where closeness does not lead to pressure, punishment, or abandonment, his nervous system can slowly begin updating its old understanding of intimacy. The women who create lasting closeness with an avoidant man are not necessarily the ones who chase hardest or love the loudest. They are the ones who remain rooted in themselves. They do not pass these tests by studying the perfect response. They simply become secure enough that the tests no longer control them. And this is important because it is easy to turn everything you have learned into a performance. You do not need to memorize how to respond every time he goes quiet, pulls away, or mentions an ex. If you are pretending to be calm while secretly keeping score, that is not security. That is anxiety wearing a calmer mask. Real security comes from building a life that is full, meaningful, and genuinely yours. A life where his attention is appreciated but not required for you to feel whole. Once that shift happens inside you, his distance stops having the same power over your emotions. You are no longer thinking, "What did I do wrong?" You are thinking, "This is his pattern. Now I can decide what is healthy for me." And remember, this process usually happens over months, not days. In the beginning, the pulling away may happen more often. The silences may last longer. Vulnerability may be followed by a stronger need for space because trust has not been established yet. But when healthy patterns are repeated over time, things can gradually change. The distance may become less frequent. The silence may become shorter. He may return more quickly after withdrawing. Vulnerability may feel easier, and he may need less time to recover after emotional closeness. That does not happen automatically, and it is not guaranteed. His willingness to grow matters just as much as your ability to remain grounded. But when both are present, this can be the natural progression of an avoidant man slowly becoming more comfortable with intimacy. If you recognized yourself in even one of these tests, understand that your experience is not necessarily random. Maybe it was the sudden silence. Maybe it was the unexpected distance after a beautiful date. Maybe it was the mention of another woman or an ex. Whatever it was, putting a name to the pattern can help you stop feeling confused by it. And that is really the purpose of understanding avoidant psychology. Not to manipulate him, not to make him chase you, not to become an expert at controlling his emotions. It is to understand what you are seeing while remaining grounded in your own self-respect. Because an avoidant man falling in love may not look like the version you see in movies. It may look like distance that confuses you, silence that makes you question everything, and tiny moments of vulnerability that disappear almost as quickly as they appear. But once you understand the pattern, those moments stop feeling completely random. You begin to recognize what may be happening underneath the behavior, and that awareness changes everything. It can stop the endless spiral of wondering what you did wrong every time he becomes quiet. It can replace confusion with clarity, and clarity gives you something much more valuable than control over him. It gives you control over how you respond. So, the next time he pulls away, remember what you learned here. His silence is not automatically rejection. His distance is not automatically proof that his feelings disappeared. But it is also not something you should automatically excuse. Look at the bigger pattern. Is he respectful? Does he make an effort? Does he gradually move closer? Does he show signs of growth? Or are you constantly waiting, chasing, and making excuses for someone who gives you almost nothing? That distinction matters. You do not need to chase him. You do not need to shrink yourself. And you do not need to become emotionally unavailable just to make an avoidant man feel safe. Stay grounded in who you are. Keep your standards. Keep your life. Let your actions come from self-respect rather than fear. Because the ultimate goal is not to become perfect at passing an avoidant man's tests. The goal is to become so secure within yourself that you can recognize his patterns without losing your peace. And if he is genuinely capable of meeting you halfway, that security gives the relationship room to grow. If he is not, that same security gives you the strength to walk away. Either way, you win something important. You stop abandoning yourself just because someone else is afraid of closeness. If this video helped you understand an avoidant man in your life, or helped you understand something you experienced in the past, share your experience in the comments. Tell me which test felt most familiar to you: the silence, the pulling away, the vulnerability, the X, or something else. And if you want more videos breaking down the hidden patterns behind avoidant behavior and emotional connection, subscribe to the Avoidant Guide. Because the more clearly you understand the pattern, the less power confusion has over you. And sometimes the most important thing you can learn about an avoidant man is not how to make him stay. It is how to stay connected to yourself while discovering whether he is truly capable of staying too.